bloodiest war on American soil. States versus states. Brothers versus brothers. Join hosts Bang and Dang as they take you battle by battle through the most divisive time in American history. Welcome to Battles of the American Civil War.
The Battle of Fort Henry, which was fought on February 6, 1862 in Stewart County, Tennessee. They're moving into Tennessee during the war. It was the first important victory for the Union and Ulysses S. Grant in the Western Theater. In early 1861, the critical border state of Kentucky had declared neutrality in the war. This neutrality was first violated, which we've said. The riverside town... This neutrality was first violated on September 3rd when Major General Leonidas Polk occupied Columbus, Kentucky. That riverside town was situated on 180-foot-high bluffs, that commanded the river at that point, where the Confederates installed 140 large guns, underwater mines, and a heavy chain that stretched a mile across the Mississippi River to Belmont, while occupying the town with 17,000 troops, thus cutting off northern commerce to the south and beyond. Yes, sir, they did, too. It didn't last long.
Nope. 2 days later, General Grant, displaying the personal initiative that would characterize his later career, seized Paducah, Kentucky, a major transportation hub of rail and port facilities at the mouth of the Tennessee River. Henceforth, neither adversary respected Kentucky's proclaimed neutrality and Confederate advantage was lost.
Right.
The buffer zone that Kentucky provided between the North and South was no longer available to assist the defense of Tennessee.
Yes, sure wasn't. By early 1862, a single general who was named Albert Sidney Johnson commanded all the Confederate forces, which we said from Arkansas to Cumberland Gap. Early 1862, Albert Sidney Johnson, we know, had Arkansas to Cumberland Gap. That was all his forces.
Right, spread too thin.
Right. The Union military command in the West suffered from a lack of unified command, on the other hand, and were organized into three separate departments. The Department of Kansas, under Major General David Hunter, the Department of Missouri, under Major General Henry W. Halleck, and the Department of the Ohio, under Brigadier General Don Carlos Buell. Don Carlos, he makes his appearance again. By January 1862, the disunity was apparent because they could not agree on a strategy for operations in the Western Theater. Buell, under political pressure to invade and hold pro-Union eastern Tennessee, moved slowly in the direction of Nashville. And Halleck's department, Grant, moved up the Tennessee River to divert attention from Buell's intended advance, which did not occur, though.
Halleck and other generals in the West were coming under political pressure from President Lincoln. He was like, I need you guys to participate in a general offensive by at least Washington's birthday.
Now Lincoln's getting fed up, and he's like, dude, we need to do something here.
He's like,
nothing's happening.
You got until...
The public's losing faith in us right now.
You got until Washington's birthday. Well, when's that? It's February 22nd.
I mean, how do you not know the father of our country?
Jeez. Well, this is despite his tradition of caution. Halleck eventually reacted positively to Grant's proposal to move against Fort Henry. Halleck hoped that this would improve his standing in relation to his rival, Buell.
Oh, that's only why.
Halleck and Grant were also concerned about rumors that Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard would soon arrive with 15 Confederate regiments.
Yeah, you don't want Beauregard there.
On 30th of January, 1862, Halleck authorized Grant to take Fort Henry.
He's like, Grant, go ahead, buddy.
You do it, bud.
Well, and Grant was like, all right, I ain't going to waste no time. He said, I'm leaving Cairo, Illinois at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers on February 2nd.
Oh, he wasted time then.
Yes. His invasion force, which arrived on the Tennessee River on February 4th and 5th, consisted of 15,000 to 17,000 men in two divisions, commanded by Brigadier Generals John H. McClernand and Charles F. Smith, and the Western Gunboat Flotilla, commanded by the United States Navy flag officer Andrew Hall Foote. Okay, so they're here again, huh?
Right.
The flotilla included 4 ironclads, the USS Cincinnati, USS Carondelet, the USS St. Louis, and the USS Essex, which was under Foote's direct command, and 3 timber-clad gunboats, the USS Conestoga, the USS Tyler, and the USS Lexington, under Lieutenant Seth Ledyard Phelps. Insufficient transport ships this early in the war to deliver all of the Army troops in a single operation required 2 trips upriver to reach the fort.
Really?
I mean, he had 17,000 men, man. I mean, you know.
Fort Henry was a 5-sided open bastion, earthen structure covering 10 acres. on the eastern bank of the Tennessee River near Kirkman's Old Landing. Bastion is basically way of defense for the fort, right? From what I understand.
Structure projecting outward from the curtain wall of a fortification, most commonly angular in shape and positioned at the corners of the fort.
Right. The site was about 1 mile above Panther Creek and about 6 miles below the mouth of the Big Sandy River and the Standing Rock Creek. In May 1861, Isham G. Harris, the governor of Tennessee, appointed the state's attorney Daniel S. Donaldson as a brigadier general and directed him to build fortifications on the rivers of Middle Tennessee. Saying, you do that. He's like, okay. Donaldson found suitable sites, but they were within the borders of Kentucky. He said, no, Tennessee. Still a neutral state at the time.
No, the rivers of, rivers of Middle Tennessee. He was like, I found some suitable ones, but they're in Kentucky.
Moving upriver, just inside Tennessee border, Donaldson selected the site of the fort on the Cumberland River that would bear his name.
That won't go so well for him in a couple of weeks.
Right. Colonel Bushrod Johnson, that's a hell of a name, Bushrod, of the Tennessee Corps of Engineers approved
Bushrod Johnson.
Sounds like a baseball player's name.
Bush Dick. Sorry, guys. You guys are serious.
Civil War. Slaves are at risk.
As construction of Fort Donelson began, Donelson moved 12 miles west to the Tennessee River and selected the site of Fort Henry, naming it after Tennessee Senator Gustavus Adolphus Henry Sr. All right. With Fort Donelson on the west bank of the Cumberland, Donelson selected the east bank of the Tennessee for the second fort, so one garrison could travel between them and defend both positions.
Nice.
He thought it would be unlikely that the two forts would be attacked simultaneously.
Well, I always think the unthinkable.
Right.
Unlike its counterpart on the Cumberland, Fort Henry was situated on low, swampy ground and dominated by hills across the river. To its advantage, it had an unobstructed field of fire 2 miles downriver.
Oh, yeah, that would be a hell of an advantage.
Donaldson's surveying team, Adna Anderson, a Civil War engineer, and Major General William F. Foster,
just a civil engineer,
right, from the 1st Tennessee Infantry, objected strongly to the site and appealed to Colonel Johnson, who inexplicably approved it. He's like, eh.
Fort was designed to stop traffic on the river, not to withstand large-scale infantry assaults that armies would use during the war. Construction began in mid-June of 1861 using men from the 10th Tennessee Infantry, and slaves, of course. After this flurry of activity, the remainder of 1861 saw little action because of forts on the Mississippi River had a higher priority for receiving men and artillery. General Polk also neglected Forts Henry and Donelson in favor of defending Columbus, Kentucky. This Polk guy doesn't seem too smart.
No, in late December, additional men from the 27th Alabama Infantry arrived along with 500 slaves to construct a small fortification across the river on Stewart's Hill, within artillery range of Fort Henry, and named it Fort Hyman. In January 1862, Brigadier General Lloyd Tillman assumed command of both Forts Henry and Donelson, with a combined force of 49 hundo. At Fort Henry, approximately 3,000 to 3,400. And 2 brigades were commanded by Colonels Adolphus Hyman and Joseph Drake. That's a normal name there.
Right.
The men were armed primarily with antique flintlock rifles from the War of 1812.
Jeez, dude, you guys couldn't upgrade your equipment?
They're 55 years old.
Jeez. 17 guns were mounted in Fort Henry by the time of the battle, 11 covering the river and the other 6 positioned to defend against a land attack, which were 18-pounder smoothbores. There were 2 heavy guns, a 10-inch Columbiad and a 24-pounder rifled canyon, with the remainder being 32-pounders. There were also 2 42-pounders, but no ammunition of that caliber was available. Hey, man, let's install these guns, but we're not going to have any ammunition.
Just look like we got something here.
When the river was at normal levels, the fort's walls rose 20 feet above it and were 20 feet thick at the base. Jeez. It's huge.
Wow.
Sloping upward to a width of nearly 10 feet at the parapet. So 20 to 10, that's still... ain't no cannon fire getting through that.
Right. However, February 1862, heavy rains caused the river to rise, and most of the fort was underwater.
Oh, no.
Including the powder magazine.
Oh, no.
The Confederates deployed one additional...
Didn't they survey how the...
they did.
How the water rise and shit?
That was not for Donelson.
But still.
Right.
Just right up the river from it.
Idiots. The Confederates deployed one additional defensive measure, which was the unique in the history of warfare. Several torpedoes. In modern terminology, a naval minefield.
Right. They called mines torpedoes.
Were anchored below the surface in the mine shipping channel.
Or the main shipping channel.
Right. Rigged to explode when touching... rigged to explode when a ship has touched it. This measure turned out to be ineffective due to the high water levels and leaks in the torpedoes.
Right. I mean, if the chains are only holding them up so high and the water is 10 feet above that, ain't going to help you much. Jeez. February 4th and 5th, Grant landed his divisions.
And not mention the holes in the containers.
Right. February 4th and 5th, Grant landed his divisions in 2 different locations. McClernand's division was 3 miles north of the fort on the east bank of the Tennessee.
Wait, just imagine if those did work, though. It probably would have been a different story.
May have been.
Didn't you think of that?
Rain. Act of God. February 4th and 5th, Grant landed his divisions in 2 different locations. McClernand's division was 3 miles north of the fort on the east bank of the Tennessee to prevent the garrison's escape. C.F. Smith's division would seize Fort Hyman on the Kentucky side of the river and turn its artillery on Fort Henry, obviously. Man. When heavy rains on the night of February 5th slowed the progress of the Union troops toward the forts, the battle turned on naval actions, which concluded before the infantry saw action.
Progress is Canadian.
Obviously.
Progress. Tillman realized that it was only a matter of time before Fort Henry fell. Only 9 guns remained above the water to mount a defense.
Jeez, dude, they were that underwater? Holy shit.
While leaving artillery in the fort to hold off the Union gunboats, he ordered the majority of his force to march under the command of Colonel Adolphus Hyman on the overland route to Fort Donelson, 12 miles away. Fort Hyman was abandoned on February 4th, and all but a handful of artillerymen left Fort Henry on the 5th of February. Jeez. Union cavalry pursued the retreating Confederates, but poor road conditions prevented any serious confrontation, and they took a few captives. So, didn't work out.
Right.
Tillman, as his custom, spent the night of February 5th and 6th on the steamer Dunbar, 1.5 miles upstream from the fort. Around midnight, he sent an update on the situation to Johnston, then returned to Fort Henry just before dawn.
On the morning of February 6th, Foot 7 Union gunboats arrived at Fort Henry and established their position around 12:30 p.m.
Oh, no.
They soon opened fire from a distance at 1,700 yards, beginning an exchange of gunfire with Fort Henry that continued for over an hour. After Tillman rejected an initial call to surrender, the fleet continued to bombard the fort. This was his first engagement using newly designed and hastily constructed ironclads. Foote deployed the 4 ironclad gunboats in a line abreast, followed by the 3 timberclads under the command of Seth Ledyard Phelps, which were held back for long range but less effective fire against the fort.
Right. Okay, so the high water level of the river and the low elevation of Fort Henry's guns allowed Foote's fleet to escape serious destruction.
Yeah. See, if that river wouldn't rose, dude, they might have been screwed.
They would have been. The Confederate fire was able to hit the ironclads only where their armor was strongest. During the bombardment, all 4 of the Union ironclads were repeatedly hit by Confederate fire. The USS Essex was seriously damaged when a 32-pound shot from Fort Henry penetrated the ironclad, hitting the middle boiler and sending scalding steam through half the ship.
Ooh.
32 crewmen were killed or wounded, including Commander William D. Porter. The ship was out of action for the remainder of the campaign.
I would assume so. After the bombardment had lasted 75 minutes, Tillman surrendered to Foote's fleet, which had closed to within 400 yards for a close-range bombardment. Before the battle, Tillman told his men that he would offer an hour of resistance to allow his men additional time to escape.
Okay.
With only 1 cannon still working down to the last few rounds due to the powder magazine being underwater,
right,
and the rest of the guns destroyed or knocked out, Tillman ordered the Confederate flag at Fort Henry lowered and a white sheet raised on the fort's flagpole. So that's what you do. You never surrender, though. No. You never put the white flag up. Go.
Just go.
Abandon the fort.
Right. Upon seeing the white flag, the Union gunboats immediately ceased fire. Small launch from the flotilla sailed.
Now, what would happen if somebody puts a white sheet or a white flag up, and then once everybody else stopped firing and they're going to, like, seize the fort, and then they just ambush them? Has that ever happened? It's got to have.
You mean that?
That's dirty as shit.
You mean the people that's putting up the white flag?
Right.
And ambush
They're
them?
doing it on purpose to draw them in.
That's like the act of war right there.
That's war crime,
right,
I would assume, right? You can't do,
that's a war crime.
You can't do that, right? I'm sure it has happened in some places.
I'm pretty sure of that, right? Yeah. Upon seeing the white flag, the Union gunboats immediately ceased fire. A small launch from the flotilla sailed through the sally port of the fort and picked up Tillman for the surrender conference and ceremony on Cincinnati.
This motherfucker's having conferences and ceremonies for surrenders.
12 officers and 82 men of the garrison surrendered. Other casualties from the fort's garrison were estimated to be 15 men killed and 20 wounded. The evacuating Confederate force left all of its artillery, of course, and equipment behind. Tillman was imprisoned, but exchanged on August 15th.
Okay. Well, Tillman wrote bitterly in his report that Fort Henry was in a wretched military position. The history of military engineering records no parallel to this case. One of the guys said there was a terrible spot for it. Grant sent a brief dispatch to Halleck. He said, "Fort Henry is ours. I shall take and destroy Fort Donelson on the 8th and return to Fort Henry." Halleck wired Washington, D.C., and he said, "Fort Henry is ours. The flag is reestablished on the soil of Tennessee. It will never be removed."
Never. Jeez. Grant and his troops arrived at Fort Henry at around 3 p.m. on the 6th of February to see that the garrison had already surrendered. McClernand's divisions arrived at the fort about 30 minutes later. In the meantime, Smith's division had reached the deserted Fort Hayman. If Grant had been cautious and delayed his departure by 2 days, the battle would have never occurred. By February 8th, Fort Henry was completely underwater.
Jeez.
On February 7th...
How high did the damn water rise?
It's the Mississippi River, man.
20 feet? That's a freaking fort.
Yeah, but it was in lowland already.
Still.
Jeez.
You're telling me this has not happened before? Surveyors couldn't went around and seen like watermarks on trees from the flooding previously?
You would think so, right?
I mean, jeez.
Well, it's 7th of February. The Union gunboats Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Essex returned to Cairo. With the whistles blowing and flying, Fort Henry's captured Confederate flags upside down.
Oh.
I mean, how can you tell?
Well, no, because they usually only had it in the corner.
Right. No, that was the main flag of the country.
Right.
The Chicago Tribune said it is one of the most complete and signal victories in the annals of the world's warfare. I mean,
Fort Henry was a big deal, dude.
it really shouldn't have been,
A
though.
big deal. Tennessee, though.
Yeah,
They've been itching to get in Tennessee for a minute.
it's true.
Fort Henry's fall quickly opened the Tennessee River to Union gunboats and shipping south of the Alabama border. Immediately after the surrender, Foote sent Lieutenant Phelps with the 3 timberclads, Tyler, Conestoga, and Lexington, on a mission upriver to destroy installations and supplies of military value.
Why wouldn't you?
The flotilla's ironclads had sustained damage in the bombardment of Fort Henry and were slower and less maneuverable, obviously. The raid reached as far as Muscle Shoals, just past Florence, Alabama, which is the river's navigable limit.
Okay. Well, the Union timberclads and their raiding parties destroyed supplies and
What are they, Vikings?
Right, an important bridge of the Memphis and Ohio Railroad, 25 miles upriver. They also captured a variety of southern ships, including the Sallywood, the Muscle, Eastport, and ironclad under construction.
Okay, so stop one of those.
The citizens of Florence asked Phelps to spare their town and its railroad bridge. Phelps agreed, seeing no military importance to the bridge.
Well, good for him. Hopefully they don't come to bite him in his ass, huh?
Right. One 19th century source described Phelps' raid as a perfect success. It discovered the real weakness of the Confederacy in that direction, the feasibility of marching an army into the heart of the Confederacy, and, better than that, it developed the most gratifying evidences of genuine Union feeling in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama.
Right, this is the first time the Union's been in these parts since the war began.
Right.
According to the same account, Phelps recruited several pro-Union Southerners to assist him during the raid. The Union gunboats arrived safely to Fort Henry on February 12th. After the fall of Fort Donelson to Grant's army on February 16th, coming up 2 episodes from now, the Tennessee and Cumberland Rivers, 2 major water routes in the Confederate West, became Union waterways for movements of troop and material.
Okay.
As Grant suspected, the Union capture of the 2 forts and the rivers flanked the Confederate forces at Columbus and soon caused them to withdraw from that city and from western Kentucky altogether.
The Confederates just, once they laid law, they needed to have some type of ground in Kentucky and Tennessee.
Well, they still have Tennessee.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Not so much.
Oh, yeah.
But Kentucky.
This is just West Tennessee.
Right, but Kentucky, gone. Although closely associated with Fort Donelson, the Fort Henry site is not managed by the United States National Park Service as part of the Fort Donelson National Battlefield.
Well, why would it be?
It is currently part of the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area.
Okay.
When the Tennessee River was dammed in the 1930s, creating Kentucky Lake, the remains of Fort Henry were permanently submerged.
Oh, morons. Why would they do that? Like, people are so dumb.
I know, huh? They wanted that lake. That lake was going to give them...
They had to dam it, though, still, come on.
The remains, a small navigation beacon far from the Kentucky shoreline marks the location of the northwest corner of the former fort.
Jeez.
Fort Hyman was on a privately owned land until October 2006 when the Callaway County, Kentucky Executive Office transferred 150 acres associated with that fort to the National Park Service for management as part of the Fort Donelson National Battlefield. So they're going to let the Hyman guy on there, but not Henry. Come on.
Jeez. I mean, they probably did it on purpose because it was always it probably continued to flood like that for years, so they had no choice, I guess. But come on,
right? Well, some of the entrenchments are still visible for the Hyman fort.
No, for
Hyman.
For
Hyman.
Oh, okay.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on new episodes of Outlaws and Gunslingers or Battles of the American Civil War, right here on the Bang Dang Network. And don't forget to check out those playlists.